Welcome back to Drowsy Tales Daily. Tonight, the people you trusted with your heart and wallet became heartless thieves. Charity founders who stole $4.7 million meant for starving children. Nonprofit directors who built mansions with disaster relief funds. And fundraisers who turned your compassion into their personal ATM. These are the charity frauds that will make you scrutinize every donation request. Our first story takes us to Denver, where children's charity founder Percival had been raising funds for underprivileged youth education and support programs throughout the Rocky Mountain region for 8 years. He was praised by donors for his passionate advocacy and ability to create meaningful programs that enhanced educational opportunities for disadvantaged children. Percival seemed genuinely committed to child welfare and helping vulnerable youth overcome educational barriers through comprehensive support services. Percival's charity helped hundreds of children access educational opportunities they never would have had, shared grateful volunteer Tabitha during a charity evaluation. His dedication to youth development created real change in our community while providing essential support for families struggling with educational costs. But donors started questioning where their contributions were being used. With Percival claiming administrative complexity and program expansion that required additional operational funding to maintain educational services and support program effectiveness for growing numbers of disadvantaged children needing assistance. We donated thousands to help children but see no evidence of educational programs or youth services, explained concerned donor Meredith to charity oversight authorities. Percival says program expansion requires additional operational funding that wasn't included in our original donation commitments. Investigation revealed Percival had been deliberately misusing charity funds while collecting donations from supporters who trusted his child advocacy, then diverting educational funding to personal expenses while claiming operational needs required additional donations for program continuation and expansion. He'd been using charity money for luxury purchases, personal travel, and expensive lifestyle expenses while providing minimal educational services and fabricating program reports to cover financial misappropriation. The scheme particularly harmed disadvantaged children who needed educational support and donors who trusted charitable giving but faced deception through systematic fund misappropriation disguised as operational complexity requiring additional funding for program expansion and administrative enhancement. When charity oversight authorities investigated his financial practices, they found evidence Percival had misappropriated over $1.8 million in educational funding while providing minimal services to disadvantaged children and fabricating program effectiveness reports. Our second story brings us to Atlanta, where disaster relief organization director Clementine had been coordinating emergency assistance and recovery support for natural disaster victims throughout the Southeast for 7 years. She was recommended by emergency management agencies and praised by communities for her relief expertise and ability to provide rapid assistance that helped disaster victims recover and rebuild their lives. Clementine seemed genuinely committed to disaster relief and helping communities overcome catastrophic events through comprehensive emergency assistance and recovery coordination. Clementine's organization provided essential disaster relief that helped our community recover from devastating flooding, shared grateful community leader Reginald during a disaster relief evaluation. Her expertise in emergency assistance and recovery coordination provided critical support that helped families rebuild while ensuring community resources were effectively utilized for maximum recovery impact. But disaster victims started experiencing delayed assistance and inadequate relief services despite substantial donor contributions, with Clementine claiming disaster complexity and resource limitations that required additional emergency funding to maintain relief effectiveness and ensure appropriate assistance for growing numbers of disaster victims needing comprehensive recovery support. Our community received minimal disaster relief despite millions in donations to Clementine's organization, explained frustrated disaster victim Delphine to emergency oversight authorities. She says disaster complexity requires additional emergency funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for community recovery assistance. Investigation revealed Clementine had been deliberately diverting disaster relief funds while collecting donations from supporters who trusted her emergency expertise, then using recovery money for personal enrichment while providing minimal assistance to disaster victims and fabricating relief reports to cover financial exploitation. She'd been purchasing luxury real estate, expensive vehicles, and personal investments with disaster relief money while providing inadequate emergency assistance and creating false documentation about relief distribution and recovery program effectiveness. The scheme particularly harmed disaster victims who needed emergency assistance and donors who trusted disaster relief giving but faced betrayal through systematic fund diversion disguised as disaster complexity, requiring additional emergency funding for relief expansion and recovery enhancement. When emergency relief oversight authorities investigated her financial practices, they found evidence Clementine had diverted over $2.3 million in disaster relief funding while providing minimal assistance to disaster victims and fabricating recovery effectiveness reports. Our third story brings us to Phoenix, where animal rescue charity coordinator Genevieve had been saving abandoned pets and providing animal welfare services throughout the valley for 6 years. She was praised by animal lovers for her rescue expertise and ability to save animals from neglect while finding loving homes through comprehensive adoption and care programs. Genevieve seemed genuinely passionate about animal welfare and helping abandoned pets find safety and permanent homes through professional rescue operations and adoption coordination. Genevieve's rescue organization saved my dog from terrible conditions and helped us find our perfect family pet, shared grateful adopter Barnabas during an animal rescue evaluation. Her dedication to animal welfare and professional rescue operations provided essential services that saved countless animals while connecting them with loving families through careful adoption screening and support. But donors started questioning animal care quality and adoption success rates despite substantial contributions, with Genevieve claiming rescue complexity and veterinary costs that required additional animal welfare funding to maintain rescue effectiveness and ensure appropriate care for increasing numbers of abandoned animals needing comprehensive medical, treatment, and rehabilitation services. We donated extensively for animal rescue but see poor conditions and questionable adoption practices, explained concerned donor Octavia to Animal Welfare Oversight. Genevieve says rescue complexity requires additional veterinary funding that wasn't included in our original donation commitments for animal care and rescue operations. Investigation revealed Genevieve had been deliberately neglecting animal care while collecting donations from supporters who trusted her rescue expertise, then using animal welfare money for personal expenses while providing substandard care and fabricating rescue reports to cover animal neglect and financial misappropriation. She'd been keeping animals in poor conditions, providing inadequate veterinary care, and using rescue funding for personal lifestyle expenses while creating false documentation about animal rescue success rates and adoption program effectiveness. The scheme particularly harmed abandoned animals who needed rescue care and donors who trusted animal welfare giving but faced deception through systematic care neglect disguised as rescue complexity, requiring additional veterinary funding for animal care enhancement and rescue program expansion. When animal welfare oversight authorities investigated her rescue practices, they found evidence Genevieve had misappropriated over $900,000 in animal rescue funding while providing substandard care to hundreds of animals and fabricating rescue effectiveness reports. Our fourth story brings us to Seattle, where homeless shelter director Lysander had been providing housing assistance and support services for individuals experiencing homelessness throughout the Pacific Northwest for 9 years. He was recommended by social service agencies and praised by communities for his shelter expertise and ability to help homeless individuals transition to stable housing while providing essential support services. Lysander seemed genuinely committed to homelessness prevention and helping vulnerable individuals achieve housing stability through comprehensive assistance and transitional support programs. Lysander's shelter provided essential housing assistance that helped me transition from homelessness to stable housing, shared grateful former client Horatio during a shelter evaluation. His expertise in transitional support and housing assistance provided critical services that changed my life while offering comprehensive programs that address the complex challenges of homelessness and housing instability. But homeless individuals started experiencing inadequate shelter conditions and limited support services despite significant donor funding, with Lysander claiming homelessness complexity and operational costs that required additional housing assistance funding to maintain shelter effectiveness and ensure appropriate services for growing numbers of homeless individuals needing comprehensive, Transitional support and housing placement assistance. The homeless shelter provides poor conditions and minimal services despite receiving substantial community donations, explained concerned social worker Evangeline to Homeless Services Oversight. Lysander says homelessness complexity requires additional operational funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for shelter operations and support services. Investigation revealed Lysander had been deliberately reducing shelter quality while collecting donations from supporters who trusted his homeless advocacy, then using housing assistance money for personal enrichment while providing substandard shelter conditions and fabricating program reports to cover financial exploitation and service reduction. He'd been reducing shelter staffing, eliminating support services, and using homeless assistance funding for personal investments and luxury expenses while providing minimal housing assistance and creating false documentation about shelter effectiveness and transitional program success rates. The scheme particularly harmed homeless individuals who needed shelter assistance and donors who trusted homeless services giving but faced betrayal through systematic service reduction disguised as homelessness complexity requiring additional operational funding for shelter enhancement and support program expansion. When Homeless Services Oversight authorities investigated his shelter practices, they found evidence Lysander had misappropriated over $1.6 million in homeless assistance funding while providing substandard shelter conditions and fabricating program effectiveness reports. Our fifth story brings us to Chicago, where Veterans Support Organization founder Prudence had been providing assistance and advocacy for military veterans throughout the metropolitan area for 5 years. She was recommended by veteran organizations and praised by communities for her advocacy expertise and ability to help veterans access benefits while providing essential support services for military families and veterans facing transition challenges. Prudence seemed genuinely committed to veteran welfare and helping military personnel overcome service-related challenges through comprehensive assistance and advocacy programs designed for veteran needs and family support. Prudence's organization helped me access veteran benefits and support services that transformed my post-military life, shared grateful veteran Millicent during a veteran support evaluation. Her expertise in veteran advocacy and benefit navigation provided essential assistance that helped me transition successfully while ensuring I received appropriate support for service-related challenges and family needs. But veterans started experiencing limited assistance and benefit access problems despite substantial donor support, with Prudence claiming veteran services complexity and bureaucratic challenges that required additional advocacy funding to maintain support effectiveness and ensure appropriate assistance for increasing numbers of veterans needing comprehensive benefit navigation and transition support services. Veterans are receiving minimal assistance despite substantial donations to Prudence's organization, explained frustrated veteran advocate Cordelia to Veteran Services Oversight. She says veteran services complexity requires additional advocacy funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for benefit assistance and support programs. Investigation revealed Prudence had been deliberately reducing veteran services while collecting donations from supporters who trusted her military advocacy, then using veteran assistance money for personal expenses while providing minimal support and fabricating program reports to cover financial misappropriation and service reduction. She'd been reducing veteran support staff, eliminating benefit assistance programs, and using veteran funding for personal travel and lifestyle expenses while providing inadequate assistance and creating false documentation about veteran program effectiveness and benefit access success rates. The scheme particularly harmed veterans who needed support services and donors who trusted veteran assistance giving but faced deception through systematic service reduction disguised as veteran services complexity requiring additional advocacy, funding for support enhancement and benefit assistance program expansion. When Veteran Services Oversight authorities investigated her assistance practices, they found evidence Prudence had misappropriated over $700,000 in veteran assistance funding while providing minimal services to military veterans and fabricating program effectiveness reports. Our sixth story brings us to Miami, where Medical Research Foundation Director Algernon had been raising funds for disease research and treatment development throughout South Florida for 8 years. He was praised by medical professionals and communities for his research expertise and ability to advance medical knowledge while funding innovative treatments that enhanced patient outcomes and medical understanding. Algernon seemed genuinely committed to medical advancement and helping researchers develop breakthrough treatments through comprehensive funding and research support programs designed for medical innovation and patient benefit. Algernon's foundation funded groundbreaking research that led to new treatment options for my daughter's rare disease, shared grateful parent Maximilian during a medical research evaluation. His dedication to medical advancement and research funding provided essential support that enhanced treatment possibilities while advancing medical knowledge for patients facing serious health challenges and rare medical conditions. But medical researchers started experiencing funding delays and research limitations despite substantial donor contributions, with Algernon claiming research complexity and development costs that required additional medical funding to maintain research effectiveness and ensure appropriate support for expanding numbers of medical studies needing comprehensive development resources and laboratory support. Our medical research received minimal funding despite millions in donations to Algernon's foundation, explained frustrated researcher Thaddeus to medical research oversight. He says research complexity requires additional development funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for medical advancement and treatment research programs. Investigation revealed Algernon had been deliberately diverting research funds while collecting donations from supporters who trusted his medical advocacy, then using medical research money for personal enrichment while providing minimal research funding and fabricating development reports to cover financial exploitation and research program reduction. He'd been using medical research donations for luxury purchases, personal investments, and expensive lifestyle expenses while providing inadequate research funding and creating false documentation about medical advancement progress and treatment development effectiveness. The scheme particularly harmed medical researchers who needed funding support and donors who trusted medical research giving but faced betrayal through systematic fund diversion disguised as research complexity, requiring additional development funding for medical advancement enhancement and treatment research expansion. When medical research oversight authorities investigated his funding practices, they found evidence Algernon had diverted over $2.7 million in medical research funding while providing minimal support to researchers and fabricating medical advancement reports. Our seventh story brings us to Portland, where environmental conservation charity coordinator Benedictine had been protecting natural habitats and promoting environmental awareness throughout the Pacific Northwest for 7 years. She was recommended by environmental organizations and praised by communities for her conservation expertise and ability to preserve ecosystems while educating communities about environmental protection and sustainability practices. Benedictine seemed genuinely committed to environmental protection and helping communities understand conservation importance through comprehensive education and habitat preservation programs designed for environmental enhancement and ecological sustainability. Benedictine's conservation work protected crucial wildlife habitat in our region while educating our community about environmental stewardship, shared grateful conservationist Algernon during an environmental evaluation. Her expertise in habitat preservation and environmental education provided essential conservation services that enhanced ecological protection while promoting community awareness of environmental challenges and conservation solutions. But environmental projects started showing minimal progress and questionable conservation results despite significant donor funding, with Benedictine claiming conservation complexity and environmental challenges that required additional protection funding to maintain conservation effectiveness and ensure appropriate habitat preservation for growing numbers of threatened ecosystems needing comprehensive protection and restoration services. Environmental projects show little progress despite substantial donations to Benedictine's conservation organization, explained concerned environmentalist Maximilian to conservation oversight authorities. She says conservation complexity requires additional protection funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for habitat preservation and environmental protection programs. Investigation revealed Benedictine had been deliberately misusing conservation funds while collecting donations from supporters who trusted her environmental expertise, then diverting habitat protection money to personal expenses while providing minimal conservation services, and fabricating environmental reports to cover financial misappropriation and project failure. She'd been using conservation donations for personal travel, luxury purchases, and investment properties while providing inadequate habitat protection and creating false documentation about environmental project success rates and conservation program effectiveness. The scheme particularly harmed threatened ecosystems that needed protection services and donors who trusted environmental giving but faced deception through systematic fund misappropriation disguised as conservation complexity, requiring additional protection funding for environmental enhancement and habitat preservation expansion. When conservation oversight authorities investigated her environmental practices, they found evidence Benedictine had misappropriated over $1.2 million in conservation funding while providing minimal habitat protection and fabricating environmental effectiveness reports. Our eighth story brings us to Dallas, where Youth Mentorship Program Director Mortimer had been providing guidance and support for at-risk teenagers throughout North Texas for 6 years. He was recommended by schools and praised by families for his mentorship expertise and ability to help troubled youth develop positive life skills while avoiding dangerous behaviors and criminal activity. Mortimer seemed genuinely committed to youth development and helping at-risk teenagers achieve success through comprehensive mentorship and life skills programs designed for positive youth outcomes and community safety enhancement. Mortimer's mentorship program helped my son avoid gang involvement and develop positive life goals, shared grateful parent Cordelia during a youth program evaluation. His expertise in youth guidance and life skills development provided essential support that transformed my son's trajectory while helping him develop confidence and positive relationships with adult mentors and community leaders. But at-risk youth started experiencing limited mentorship services and program access despite substantial community funding, with Mortimer claiming youth program complexity and behavioral challenges that required additional mentorship funding to maintain program effectiveness and ensure appropriate guidance for increasing numbers of at-risk teenagers needing comprehensive life skills development and positive relationship building. At-risk youth are receiving minimal mentorship despite significant donations to Mortimer's program, explained concerned youth advocate Millicent to Youth Services Oversight. He says youth program complexity requires additional guidance funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for mentorship services and life skills development programs. Investigation revealed Mortimer had been deliberately reducing youth services while collecting donations from supporters who trusted his youth advocacy, then using mentorship money for personal expenses while providing minimal guidance and fabricating program reports to cover financial misappropriation and service reduction. He'd been reducing mentorship staff, eliminating life skills programs, and using youth funding for personal entertainment and lifestyle expenses while providing inadequate guidance and creating false documentation about youth program effectiveness and positive outcome achievement rates. The scheme particularly harmed at-risk youth who needed mentorship services and donors who trusted youth development giving but faced betrayal through systematic service reduction disguised as youth program complexity, requiring additional guidance funding for mentorship enhancement and life skills program expansion. When Youth Services Oversight authorities investigated his mentorship practices, they found evidence Mortimer had misappropriated over $800,000 in youth development funding while providing minimal services to at-risk teenagers and fabricating program effectiveness reports. Our ninth story brings us to Houston, where Senior Citizens Assistance Organization founder Evangeline had been providing support services and advocacy for elderly community members throughout Southeast Texas for 9 years. She was praised by senior advocates and families for her elderly care expertise and ability to help seniors maintain independence while accessing essential services and support programs designed for aging challenges and elder welfare enhancement. Evangeline seemed genuinely committed to senior welfare and helping elderly individuals overcome aging obstacles through comprehensive assistance and advocacy programs that addressed senior needs and community support requirements. Evangeline's organization provided essential services that helped my elderly mother maintain independence and dignity, shared appreciative daughter Archibald during a senior services evaluation. Her expertise in elder advocacy and support coordination provided critical assistance that enhanced my mother's quality of life while ensuring she received appropriate services for aging challenges and health maintenance needs. But seniors started experiencing reduced services and limited assistance despite significant donor support. With Evangeline claiming senior services complexity and aging challenges that required additional elder care funding to maintain assistance effectiveness and ensure appropriate support for growing numbers of elderly individuals needing comprehensive care, coordination, and advocacy services. Elderly community members are receiving minimal assistance despite substantial donations to Evangeline's organization, explained concerned senior advocate Prudence to Elder Services Oversight. She says senior services complexity requires additional care funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for elder assistance and support programs. Investigation revealed Evangeline had been deliberately reducing senior services while collecting donations from supporters who trusted her elder advocacy, then using senior assistance money for personal enrichment while providing minimal support and fabricating program reports to cover financial exploitation and service reduction. She'd been reducing senior support staff, eliminating assistance programs, and using elder care funding for personal investments and luxury expenses while providing inadequate services and creating false documentation about senior program effectiveness and assistance delivery success rates. The scheme particularly harmed elderly individuals who needed support services and donors who trusted senior assistance giving but faced deception through systematic service reduction disguised as senior services complexity requiring additional care, funding for elder assistance enhancement, and support program expansion. When Elder Services Oversight authorities investigated her assistance practices, they found evidence Evangeline had misappropriated over $1.4 million in senior assistance funding while providing minimal services to elderly community members and fabricating program effectiveness reports. Our 10th story brings us to San Diego, where Educational Scholarship Foundation Director Bartholomew had been providing financial assistance for students pursuing higher education throughout Southern California for 5 years. He was recommended by educational institutions and praised by families for his scholarship expertise and ability to help deserving students access college education while reducing financial barriers that prevented educational achievement and career development. Bartholomew seemed genuinely committed to educational access and helping students achieve academic success through comprehensive scholarship and financial assistance programs designed for educational opportunity enhancement and student support. Bartholomew's Scholarship Foundation helped my daughter attend college despite our family's financial limitations, shared grateful parent Delphine during an educational assistance evaluation. His dedication to educational access and student support provided essential financial assistance that transformed my daughter's future while ensuring she could pursue higher education without overwhelming financial burden. But students started experiencing scholarship delays and reduced financial assistance despite substantial donor contributions, with Bartholomew claiming educational funding complexity and tuition increases that required additional scholarship funding to maintain assistance effectiveness and ensure appropriate support for growing numbers of students needing comprehensive financial assistance and educational support programs. Students are receiving minimal scholarship assistance despite millions in donations to Bartholomew's Foundation, explained frustrated educator Genevieve to educational oversight authorities. He says educational funding complexity requires additional scholarship funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for student assistance and educational support programs. Investigation revealed Bartholomew had been deliberately diverting scholarship funds while collecting donations from supporters who trusted his educational advocacy, then using student assistance money for personal expenses while providing minimal scholarships and fabricating educational reports to cover financial misappropriation and assistance reduction. He'd been using scholarship donations for luxury travel, expensive purchases, and personal investments while providing inadequate financial assistance and creating false documentation about student support effectiveness and educational achievement enhancement rates. The scheme particularly harmed deserving students who needed educational assistance and donors who trusted scholarship giving but faced betrayal through systematic fund diversion disguised as educational funding complexity requiring additional scholarship funding for student assistance enhancement and educational support program expansion. When educational oversight authorities investigated his scholarship practices, they found evidence Bartholomew had diverted over $1.9 million in educational assistance funding while providing minimal scholarships to deserving students and fabricating educational effectiveness reports. Our 11th story brings us to Phoenix, where food bank coordinator Clementine had been distributing meals and nutrition assistance for families facing food insecurity throughout the valley for 8 years. She was praised by community organizations and volunteers for her food distribution expertise and ability to address hunger while providing essential nutrition support for vulnerable families and individuals experiencing food access challenges. Clementine seemed genuinely committed to hunger relief and helping communities overcome food insecurity through comprehensive distribution and nutrition assistance programs designed for food access enhancement and community welfare improvement. Clementine's food bank provided essential nutrition assistance that helped our family during difficult financial times, shared grateful recipient Reginald during a food assistance evaluation. Her expertise in food distribution and community support provided critical services that addressed our hunger while ensuring our children received proper nutrition during our family's economic challenges and food access difficulties. But families started experiencing reduced food assistance and limited distribution services despite substantial donor support. With Clementine claiming food distribution complexity and supply challenges that required additional nutrition funding to maintain assistance effectiveness and ensure appropriate support for growing numbers of families needing comprehensive food access and nutrition assistance programs. Families are receiving minimal food assistance despite substantial donations to Clementine's food bank, explained concerned hunger advocate Delphine to Food Assistance Oversight. She says food distribution complexity requires additional nutrition funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for hunger relief and food assistance programs. Investigation revealed Clementine had been deliberately reducing food services while collecting donations from supporters who trusted her hunger relief expertise, then using food assistance money for personal expenses while providing minimal distribution and fabricating nutrition reports to cover financial misappropriation and service reduction. She'd been reducing food distribution quantities, eliminating nutrition programs, and using hunger relief funding for personal lifestyle expenses while providing inadequate assistance and creating false documentation about food program effectiveness and hunger relief success rates. The scheme particularly harmed families experiencing food insecurity who needed nutrition assistance and donors who trusted hunger relief giving but faced deception through systematic service reduction disguised as food distribution complexity, requiring additional nutrition funding for hunger relief enhancement and food assistance program expansion. When food assistance oversight authorities investigated her distribution practices, they found evidence Clementine had misappropriated over $600,000 in hunger relief funding while providing minimal food assistance to vulnerable families and fabricating nutrition effectiveness reports. Our 12th story brings us to Boston, where literacy program coordinator Genevieve had been providing reading instruction and educational support for adults with learning challenges throughout New England for 7 years. She was recommended by literacy organizations and praised by communities for her instruction expertise and ability to help adults develop reading skills while improving educational opportunities and employment prospects for individuals facing literacy barriers. Genevieve seemed genuinely committed to literacy advancement and helping adults overcome educational obstacles through comprehensive instruction and support programs designed for literacy enhancement and personal development improvement. Genevieve's literacy program helped me learn to read and transformed my employment opportunities, shared grateful participant Barnabas during a literacy evaluation. Her expertise in adult education and reading instruction provided essential skills that changed my life while building my confidence and opening career possibilities that were previously impossible due to my literacy challenges. But adult learners started experiencing limited instruction and reduced program access despite significant donor funding. With Genevieve claiming literacy education complexity and learning challenges that required additional instruction funding to maintain program effectiveness and ensure appropriate support for growing numbers of adults needing comprehensive reading, instruction, and educational assistance programs. Adult learners are receiving minimal literacy instruction despite substantial donations to Genevieve's program, explained concerned education advocate Octavia to literacy oversight authorities. She says literacy education complexity requires additional instruction funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for reading programs and educational support services. Investigation revealed Genevieve had been deliberately reducing literacy services while collecting donations from supporters who trusted her educational expertise, then using instruction money for personal expenses while providing minimal teaching and fabricating literacy reports to cover financial misappropriation and program reduction. She'd been reducing instruction staff, eliminating reading programs, and using literacy funding for personal entertainment and travel expenses while providing inadequate education and creating false documentation about literacy program effectiveness and reading skill development success rates. The scheme particularly harmed adults needing literacy instruction who trusted educational services but faced learning disappointment through systematic service reduction disguised as literacy education complexity, requiring additional instruction funding for reading program enhancement and educational support expansion. When literacy oversight authorities investigated her instruction practices, they found evidence Genevieve had misappropriated over $400,000 in literacy funding while providing minimal instruction to adult learners and fabricating educational effectiveness reports. Our 13th story brings us to Seattle, where mental health support organization director Lysander had been providing counseling services and emotional support for individuals facing mental health challenges throughout the Pacific Northwest for 6 years. He was recommended by healthcare providers and praised by communities for his counseling expertise and ability to help people overcome mental health obstacles while providing essential support services for emotional wellness and psychological healing. Lysander seemed genuinely committed to mental health advocacy and helping individuals achieve emotional stability through comprehensive counseling and support programs designed for mental wellness enhancement and psychological recovery assistance. Lysander's organization provided essential counseling that helped me overcome depression and rebuild my life, shared grateful client Horatio during a mental health evaluation. His expertise in emotional support and psychological counseling provided critical services that transformed my mental health while helping me develop coping skills and emotional resilience for long-term wellness and stability. But individuals started experiencing limited counseling access and reduced mental health services despite substantial donor contributions, with Lysander claiming mental health complexity and treatment challenges that required additional counseling funding to maintain support effectiveness and ensure appropriate services for growing numbers of individuals needing comprehensive psychological assistance and emotional wellness programs. Individuals are receiving minimal mental health support despite significant donations to Lysander's organization, explained concerned mental health advocate Evangeline to Psychological Services Oversight. He says mental health complexity requires additional counseling funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for psychological support and emotional wellness programs. Investigation revealed Lysander had been deliberately reducing mental health services while collecting donations from supporters who trusted his counseling expertise, then using psychological support money for personal enrichment while providing minimal counseling and fabricating mental health reports to cover financial exploitation and service reduction. He'd been reducing counseling staff, eliminating support programs, and using mental health funding for personal investments and luxury purchases while providing inadequate services and creating false documentation about psychological program effectiveness and emotional wellness success rates. The scheme particularly harmed individuals needing mental health support who trusted psychological services but faced emotional disappointment through systematic service reduction disguised as mental health complexity, requiring additional counseling funding for psychological support enhancement and emotional wellness program expansion. When mental health oversight authorities investigated his counseling practices, they found evidence Lysander had misappropriated over $1.1 million in psychological support funding while providing minimal services to individuals facing mental health challenges and fabricating counseling effectiveness reports. Our 14th story brings us to Denver, where Community Development Foundation founder Prudence had been supporting neighborhood improvement and social programs throughout the Rocky Mountain region for 9 years. She was praised by community leaders and residents for her development expertise and ability to enhance neighborhoods while providing essential community services that improve quality of life and social cohesion for diverse populations. Prudence seemed genuinely committed to community enhancement and helping neighborhoods overcome social challenges through comprehensive development and support programs designed for community improvement and social welfare advancement. Prudence's foundation transformed our neighborhood through community programs that enhanced safety and social connections, shared grateful resident Millicent during a community development evaluation. Her expertise in neighborhood improvement and social programming provided essential services that strengthened our community while addressing social challenges and creating positive change for residents facing various quality of life issues. But communities started experiencing minimal improvement and limited program implementation despite substantial donor support. With Prudence claiming community development complexity and social challenges that required additional improvement funding to maintain program effectiveness and ensure appropriate services for growing numbers of neighborhoods needing comprehensive development assistance and social support programs. Neighborhoods are seeing minimal improvement despite substantial donations to Prudence's foundation, explained frustrated community organizer Cordelia to development oversight authorities. She says community development complexity requires additional improvement funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for neighborhood enhancement and social support programs. Investigation revealed Prudence had been deliberately misusing community funds while collecting donations from supporters who trusted her development expertise, then diverting neighborhood improvement money to personal expenses while providing minimal community services and fabricating development reports to cover financial misappropriation and program failure. She'd been using community development donations for personal real estate investments, luxury lifestyle expenses, and travel, while providing inadequate neighborhood services and creating false documentation about community improvement effectiveness and social program success rates. The scheme particularly harmed neighborhoods needing development assistance and donors who trusted community improvement giving but faced betrayal through systematic fund misappropriation disguised as community development complexity, requiring additional improvement funding for neighborhood enhancement and social program expansion. When community development oversight authorities investigated her improvement practices, they found evidence Prudence had misappropriated over $2.1 million in community development funding while providing minimal services to neighborhoods and fabricating improvement effectiveness reports. Our 15th story brings us to Miami, where Cultural Arts Foundation Director Algernon had been supporting artistic programs and cultural education throughout South Florida for 5 years. He was recommended by arts organizations and praised by communities for his cultural expertise and ability to enhance artistic expression while providing essential arts education that enriched community cultural life and creative development. Algernon seemed genuinely committed to arts advancement and helping communities appreciate cultural diversity through comprehensive artistic and educational programs designed for cultural enhancement and creative expression promotion. Algernon's foundation supported incredible arts programs that enriched our community's cultural life, shared grateful artist Maximilian during a cultural arts evaluation. His dedication to artistic expression and cultural education provided essential support that enhanced creative opportunities while promoting cultural understanding and artistic development for community members of all ages and backgrounds. But artists started experiencing limited funding and reduced program support despite significant donor contributions. With Algernon claiming arts funding complexity and cultural challenges that required additional artistic funding to maintain program effectiveness and ensure appropriate support for growing numbers of artists needing comprehensive creative assistance and cultural education programs. Artists are receiving minimal support despite substantial donations to Algernon's foundation, explained frustrated arts advocate Thaddeus to cultural oversight authorities. He says arts funding complexity requires additional artistic funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for cultural programs and creative support services. Investigation revealed Algernon had been deliberately diverting arts funds while collecting donations from supporters who trusted his cultural expertise, then using artistic funding for personal expenses while providing minimal arts support and fabricating cultural reports to cover financial misappropriation and program reduction. He'd been using arts donations for personal art collection purchases, luxury entertainment expenses, and travel while providing inadequate artistic support and creating false documentation about cultural program effectiveness and creative development success rates. The scheme particularly harmed artists needing creative support and donors who trusted cultural giving but faced deception through systematic fund diversion disguised as arts funding, complexity requiring additional artistic funding for cultural program enhancement and creative support expansion. When cultural oversight authorities investigated his arts practices, they found evidence Algernon had diverted over $700,000 in cultural funding while providing minimal support to artists and fabricating arts effectiveness reports. Our 16th story brings us to Portland, where Substance Abuse Recovery Center Director Benedictine had been providing treatment and support services for individuals struggling with addiction throughout the Pacific Northwest for 8 years. She was recommended by healthcare providers and praised by communities for her recovery expertise and ability to help people overcome addiction while providing essential support services for sobriety maintenance and life reconstruction. Benedictine seemed genuinely committed to addiction recovery and helping individuals achieve sobriety through comprehensive treatment and support programs designed for recovery enhancement and addiction prevention assistance. Benedictine's Recovery Center provided essential treatment that helped me overcome addiction and rebuild my life, shared grateful recovering individual Algernon during a recovery evaluation. Her expertise in addiction treatment and recovery support provided critical services that transformed my life while helping me develop sobriety skills and emotional stability for long-term recovery and personal reconstruction. But individuals started experiencing limited treatment access and reduced recovery services despite substantial donor funding, with Benedictine claiming addiction treatment complexity and recovery challenges that required additional treatment funding to maintain program effectiveness and ensure appropriate services for growing numbers of individuals needing comprehensive addiction assistance and recovery support programs. Individuals are receiving minimal addiction treatment despite significant donations to Benedictine's center, explained concerned recovery advocate Maximilian to Substance Abuse Oversight. She says addiction treatment complexity requires additional recovery funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for substance abuse programs and treatment services. Investigation revealed Benedictine had been deliberately reducing recovery services while collecting donations from supporters who trusted her addiction expertise, then using treatment money for personal enrichment while providing minimal recovery support and fabricating addiction reports to cover financial exploitation and service reduction. She'd been reducing treatment staff, eliminating recovery programs, and using addiction funding for personal lifestyle expenses and investments while providing inadequate services and creating false documentation about recovery program effectiveness and sobriety success rates. The scheme particularly harmed individuals struggling with addiction who needed treatment services but faced recovery disappointment through systematic service reduction disguised as addiction treatment complexity requiring additional recovery funding for substance abuse program enhancement and treatment service expansion. When substance abuse oversight authorities investigated her recovery practices, they found evidence Benedictine had misappropriated over $1.3 million in addiction treatment funding while providing minimal services to individuals struggling with addiction and fabricating recovery effectiveness reports. Our 17th story brings us to Chicago, where women's shelter organization founder Mortimer had been providing safety and support services for individuals escaping domestic violence throughout the metropolitan area for 7 years. He was recommended by social service agencies and praised by communities for his shelter expertise and ability to help domestic violence survivors achieve safety while providing essential support services for healing and independence development. Mortimer seemed genuinely committed to domestic violence prevention and helping survivors overcome abuse through comprehensive shelter and support programs designed for safety enhancement and healing assistance. Mortimer's shelter provided essential safety that helped me escape domestic violence and rebuild my independence, shared grateful survivor Cordelia during a domestic violence evaluation. His expertise in survivor support and safety coordination provided critical services that saved my life while helping me develop independence skills and emotional healing for long-term safety and personal empowerment. But domestic violence survivors started experiencing inadequate shelter conditions and limited support services despite significant donor contributions, with Mortimer claiming domestic violence complexity and safety challenges that required additional shelter funding to maintain program effectiveness and ensure appropriate services for growing numbers of survivors needing comprehensive safety assistance and healing support programs. Survivors are receiving minimal shelter support despite substantial donations to Mortimer's organization, explained concerned domestic violence advocate Millicent to Safety Services Oversight. He says domestic violence complexity requires additional shelter funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for survivor assistance and safety programs. Investigation revealed Mortimer had been deliberately reducing shelter services while collecting donations from supporters who trusted his safety expertise, then using domestic violence funding for personal expenses while providing minimal shelter support and fabricating safety reports to cover financial misappropriation and service reduction. He'd been reducing shelter staff, eliminating support programs, and using survivor assistance funding for personal entertainment and lifestyle expenses while providing inadequate services and creating false documentation about shelter program effectiveness and survivor safety success rates. The scheme particularly harmed domestic violence survivors who needed safety services but faced continued danger through systematic service reduction disguised as domestic violence complexity requiring additional shelter funding for survivor assistance enhancement and safety program expansion. When domestic violence oversight authorities investigated his shelter practices, they found evidence Mortimer had misappropriated over $900,000 in survivor assistance funding while providing minimal services to domestic violence survivors and fabricating safety effectiveness reports. Our 18th story brings us to Houston, where Refugee Assistance Organization Director Evangeline had been providing resettlement and support services for refugees and immigrants throughout Southeast Texas for 6 years. She was recommended by immigration organizations and praised by communities for her resettlement expertise and ability to help refugees integrate successfully while providing essential support services for cultural adaptation and independence development. Evangeline seemed genuinely committed to refugee assistance and helping displaced individuals achieve stability through comprehensive resettlement and support programs designed for integration enhancement and cultural adaptation assistance. Evangeline's organization provided essential resettlement support that helped our family integrate successfully into American society, shared grateful refugee Archibald during a resettlement evaluation. Her expertise in cultural adaptation and integration assistance provided critical services that transformed our transition while helping us develop independent skills and community connections for successful resettlement and family stability. But refugees started experiencing limited assistance and inadequate support services despite substantial donor funding. With Evangeline claiming resettlement complexity and integration challenges that required additional assistance funding to maintain program effectiveness and ensure appropriate services for growing numbers of refugees needing comprehensive cultural adaptation and resettlement support programs. Refugees are receiving minimal assistance despite significant donations to Evangeline's organization, explained concerned immigration advocate Prudence to refugee oversight authorities. She says resettlement complexity requires additional assistance funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for refugee support and integration programs. Investigation revealed Evangeline had been deliberately reducing refugee services while collecting donations from supporters who trusted her resettlement expertise, then using refugee assistance money for personal enrichment while providing minimal support and fabricating integration reports to cover financial exploitation and service reduction. She'd been reducing resettlement staff, eliminating support programs, and using refugee funding for personal investments and luxury expenses while providing inadequate assistance and creating false documentation about integration program effectiveness and resettlement success rates. The scheme particularly harmed refugees who needed assistance services and donors who trusted refugee support giving but faced deception through systematic service reduction disguised as resettlement complexity, requiring additional assistance funding for refugee support enhancement and integration program expansion. When Refugee Assistance Oversight Authorities investigated her resettlement practices, they found evidence Evangeline had misappropriated over $800,000 in refugee assistance funding while providing minimal services to displaced individuals and fabricating integration effectiveness reports. Our 19th story brings us to San Diego, where Special Needs Children Foundation Director Bartholomew had been providing specialized care and educational support for children with disabilities throughout Southern California for 9 years. He was recommended by healthcare providers and praised by families for his special needs expertise and ability to help disabled children access appropriate services while providing essential support for families navigating complex care requirements. Bartholomew seemed genuinely committed to special needs advocacy and helping children with disabilities achieve their potential through comprehensive care and educational programs designed for disability support enhancement and family assistance. Bartholomew's foundation provided essential specialized care that helped my disabled son access services that transformed his development, shared grateful parent Delphine during a special needs evaluation. His expertise in disability support and educational advocacy provided critical assistance that enhanced my son's opportunities while helping our family navigate complex care systems and support requirements for optimal development outcomes. But families started experiencing limited specialized services and reduced disability support despite substantial donor contributions, with Bartholomew claiming special needs complexity and care challenges that required additional disability funding to maintain program effectiveness and ensure appropriate services for growing numbers of children needing comprehensive specialized care and educational support programs. Families are receiving minimal specialized support despite substantial donations to Bartholomew's foundation, explained frustrated disability advocate Genevieve to Special Needs Oversight. He says special needs complexity requires additional disability funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for specialized care and educational support programs. Investigation revealed Bartholomew had been deliberately reducing special needs services while collecting donations from supporters who trusted his disability expertise, then using specialized care money for personal expenses while providing minimal support and fabricating disability reports to cover financial misappropriation and service reduction. He'd been reducing specialized care staff, eliminating educational programs, and using disability funding for personal lifestyle expenses while providing inadequate assistance and creating false documentation about special needs program effectiveness and disability support success rates. The scheme particularly harmed children with disabilities who needed specialized services and donors who trusted special needs giving but faced betrayal through systematic service reduction disguised as special needs complexity requiring additional disability funding for specialized care enhancement and educational support program expansion. When Special Needs Oversight authorities investigated his disability practices, they found evidence Bartholomew had misappropriated over $1.5 million in specialized care funding while providing minimal services to children with disabilities and fabricating disability effectiveness reports. Our 20th story brings us to Atlanta, where Community Health Clinic Coordinator Clementine had been providing medical care and health services for underserved populations throughout the Southeast for 5 years. She was recommended by healthcare organizations and praised by communities for her medical expertise and ability to address health disparities while providing essential healthcare access for vulnerable populations facing medical care barriers. Clementine seemed genuinely committed to healthcare equity and helping underserved communities achieve health wellness through comprehensive medical and preventive care programs designed for health access enhancement and community wellness improvement. Clementine's clinic provided essential health care that helped our underserved community access medical services we desperately needed, shared grateful patient Reginald during a community health evaluation. Her expertise in healthcare access and medical service coordination provided critical care that improved our community's health while addressing medical needs that were previously unmet due to healthcare barriers and access limitations. But underserved patients started experiencing limited healthcare access and reduced medical services despite significant donor funding, with Clementine claiming healthcare complexity and medical challenges that required additional health funding to maintain clinic effectiveness and ensure appropriate services for growing numbers of patients needing comprehensive medical care and preventive health programs. Patients are receiving minimal health care despite substantial donations to Clementine's clinic, explained concerned health advocate Delphine to healthcare oversight authorities. She says healthcare complexity requires additional medical funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for community health and medical care programs. Investigation revealed Clementine had been deliberately reducing healthcare services while collecting donations from supporters who trusted her medical expertise, then using healthcare money for personal enrichment while providing minimal medical care and fabricating health reports to cover financial exploitation and service reduction. She'd been reducing medical staff, eliminating healthcare programs, and using health funding for personal investments and luxury purchases while providing inadequate care and creating false documentation about clinic effectiveness and community health improvement rates. The scheme particularly harmed underserved patients who needed healthcare services and donors who trusted community health giving but faced deception through systematic service reduction disguised as healthcare complexity, requiring additional medical funding for health service enhancement and community care program expansion. When healthcare oversight authorities investigated her medical practices, they found evidence Clementine had misappropriated over $1.2 million in healthcare funding while providing minimal medical services to underserved patients and fabricating health effectiveness reports. Our 21st story brings us to Phoenix, where disaster preparedness organization founder Genevieve had been educating communities and coordinating emergency readiness throughout the valley for 8 years. She was recommended by emergency management agencies and praised by communities for her preparedness expertise and ability to help residents plan for disasters while providing essential emergency coordination for community safety and disaster response effectiveness. Genevieve seemed genuinely committed to disaster preparedness and helping communities achieve emergency readiness through comprehensive education and coordination programs designed for disaster response enhancement and community safety improvement. Genevieve's organization helped our community prepare for emergencies and coordinated effective disaster response during recent flooding, shared grateful resident Barnabas during a disaster preparedness evaluation. Her expertise in emergency planning and disaster coordination provided essential preparation that enhanced our community's safety while ensuring effective response capabilities for various emergency situations and natural disaster challenges. But communities started experiencing inadequate emergency preparation and limited disaster coordination despite substantial donor support, with Genevieve claiming disaster preparedness complexity and emergency challenges that required additional preparedness funding to maintain coordination effectiveness and ensure appropriate services for growing numbers of communities needing comprehensive emergency planning and disaster response programs. Communities are receiving minimal emergency preparation despite significant donations to Genevieve's organization, explained concerned emergency advocate Octavia to Disaster Preparedness Oversight. She says disaster preparedness complexity requires additional emergency funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for community preparedness and disaster coordination programs. Investigation revealed Genevieve had been deliberately reducing preparedness services while collecting donations from supporters who trusted her emergency expertise, then using disaster preparedness money for personal expenses while providing minimal coordination and fabricating emergency reports to cover financial misappropriation and service reduction. She'd been reducing emergency coordination staff, eliminating preparedness programs, and using disaster funding for personal travel and entertainment expenses while providing inadequate preparation and creating false documentation about emergency program effectiveness and community disaster readiness success rates. The scheme particularly harmed communities needing emergency preparation who trusted disaster preparedness services but faced safety risks through systematic service reduction disguised as disaster preparedness complexity requiring additional emergency funding for preparedness enhancement and disaster coordination program expansion. When disaster preparedness oversight authorities investigated her emergency practices, they found evidence Genevieve had misappropriated over $600,000 in emergency preparedness funding while providing minimal services to communities and fabricating disaster readiness effectiveness reports. Our 22nd story brings us to Seattle, where Job Training Program Director Lysander had been providing employment skills and career development for unemployed individuals throughout the Pacific Northwest for 7 years. He was recommended by employment agencies and praised by communities for his training expertise and ability to help unemployed people develop marketable skills while providing essential career support for employment achievement and economic stability. Lysander seemed genuinely committed to employment assistance and helping unemployed individuals achieve career success through comprehensive training and development programs designed for employment enhancement and economic empowerment. Lysander's job training program helped me develop marketable skills that led to stable employment and career advancement, shared grateful graduate Horatio during an employment training evaluation. His expertise in career development and skills training provided essential preparation that transformed my employment prospects while helping me develop confidence and professional abilities for long-term career success and economic stability. But unemployed individuals started experiencing limited training access and reduced employment support despite substantial donor funding, with Lysander claiming employment training complexity and career challenges that required additional training funding to maintain program effectiveness and ensure appropriate services for growing numbers of unemployed individuals needing comprehensive skills development and career assistance programs. Unemployed individuals are receiving minimal training despite significant donations to Lysander's program, explained concerned employment advocate Evangeline to Job Training Oversight. He says employment training complexity requires additional career funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for skills development and employment assistance programs. Investigation revealed Lysander had been deliberately reducing training services while collecting donations from supporters who trusted his employment expertise, then using job training money for personal enrichment while providing minimal career support and fabricating employment reports to cover financial exploitation and service reduction. He'd been reducing training staff, eliminating skills programs, and using employment funding for personal investments and lifestyle expenses while providing inadequate training and creating false documentation about job program effectiveness and employment success rates. The scheme particularly harmed unemployed individuals who needed training services and donors who trusted employment assistance giving but faced betrayal through systematic service reduction disguised as employment training complexity, requiring additional career funding for skills development enhancement and job training program expansion. When employment training oversight authorities investigated his career practices, they found evidence Lysander had misappropriated over $700,000 in job training funding while providing minimal services to unemployed individuals and fabricating employment effectiveness reports. Our 23rd story brings us to Denver, where Family Support Organization Coordinator Prudence had been providing assistance and counseling for families facing crisis situations throughout the Rocky Mountain region for 6 years. She was recommended by social service agencies and praised by communities for her family expertise and ability to help families overcome challenges while providing essential support services for family stability and crisis resolution. Prudence seemed genuinely committed to family welfare and helping troubled families achieve stability through comprehensive assistance and counseling programs designed for family enhancement and crisis intervention support. Prudence's organization provided essential family support that helped us overcome crisis and rebuild our family stability, shared grateful family member Millicent during a family services evaluation. Her expertise in family counseling and crisis intervention provided critical assistance that transformed our family situation while helping us develop stability skills and emotional resilience for long-term family wellness and unity. But families started experiencing limited counseling access and reduced support services despite substantial donor contributions, with Prudence claiming family services complexity and crisis challenges that required additional family funding to maintain program effectiveness and ensure appropriate services for growing numbers of families needing comprehensive crisis intervention and stability assistance programs. Families are receiving minimal support despite significant donations to Prudence's organization, explained concerned family advocate Cordelia to Family Services Oversight. She says family services complexity requires additional crisis funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for family assistance and counseling programs. Investigation revealed Prudence had been deliberately reducing family services while collecting donations from supporters who trusted her family expertise, then using family assistance money for personal expenses while providing minimal counseling and fabricating family reports to cover financial misappropriation and service reduction. She'd been reducing family counseling staff, eliminating support programs, and using family funding for personal entertainment and travel expenses while providing inadequate assistance and creating false documentation about family program effectiveness and crisis resolution success rates. The scheme particularly harmed families needing support services who trusted family assistance but faced continued crisis through systematic service reduction disguised as family services complexity, requiring additional crisis funding for family support enhancement and counseling program expansion. When Family Services Oversight Authorities investigated her assistance practices, they found evidence Prudence had misappropriated over $500,000 in family support funding while providing minimal services to families in crisis and fabricating family effectiveness reports. Our 24th story brings us to Miami, where International Aid Organization Director Algernon had been coordinating humanitarian assistance and development projects for impoverished communities worldwide for 9 years. He was recommended by international development agencies and praised by donors for his humanitarian expertise and ability to address global poverty while providing essential aid for communities facing extreme hardship and development challenges. Algernon seemed genuinely committed to international aid and helping impoverished communities achieve development through comprehensive humanitarian and assistance programs designed for poverty reduction and global welfare improvement. Algernon's organization provided essential humanitarian aid that helped impoverished communities access clean water and basic necessities, shared grateful international volunteer Maximilian during a humanitarian evaluation. His expertise in international development and humanitarian coordination provided critical assistance that transformed communities while addressing extreme poverty and basic human needs for improved quality of life and development opportunities. But impoverished communities started receiving minimal aid and limited development assistance despite substantial international donor funding, with Algernon claiming humanitarian complexity and development challenges that required additional aid funding to maintain program effectiveness and ensure appropriate assistance for growing numbers of communities needing comprehensive poverty reduction and development support programs. Communities are receiving minimal humanitarian aid despite substantial international donations to Algernon's organization, explained concerned international advocate Thaddeus to humanitarian oversight authorities. He says humanitarian complexity requires additional development funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for international aid and poverty reduction programs. Investigation revealed Algernon had been deliberately diverting humanitarian funds while collecting donations from supporters who trusted his international expertise, then using aid money for personal enrichment while providing minimal assistance and fabricating development reports to cover financial exploitation and aid reduction. He'd been using humanitarian donations for luxury lifestyle expenses, personal real estate investments, and expensive travel while providing inadequate aid and creating false documentation about international program effectiveness and community development success rates. The scheme particularly harmed impoverished communities who needed humanitarian assistance and donors who trusted international aid giving but faced betrayal through systematic fund diversion disguised as humanitarian complexity, requiring additional development funding for aid enhancement and international assistance program expansion. When international aid oversight authorities investigated his humanitarian practices, they found evidence Algernon had diverted over $3.2 million in humanitarian funding while providing minimal aid to impoverished communities and fabricating international effectiveness reports. Our 25th story brings us to Portland, where disability rights advocacy organization founder Benedictine had been promoting accessibility and fighting discrimination for individuals with disabilities throughout the Pacific Northwest for 5 years. She was recommended by disability organizations and praised by communities for her advocacy expertise and ability to advance disability rights while providing essential support for accessibility enhancement and discrimination prevention. Benedictine seemed genuinely committed to disability advocacy and helping individuals with disabilities achieve equality through comprehensive rights promotion and accessibility programs designed for disability empowerment and social inclusion improvement. Benedictine's advocacy helped secure accessibility improvements that transformed opportunities for individuals with disabilities in our community. Shared grateful disability rights supporter Algernon during a disability advocacy evaluation. Her expertise in disability rights and accessibility promotion provided essential advocacy that enhanced inclusion while ensuring individuals with disabilities received appropriate accommodations and equal treatment for improved independence and community participation. But individuals with disabilities started experiencing limited advocacy support and reduced accessibility services despite substantial donor contributions, with Benedictine claiming disability advocacy complexity and rights challenges that required additional advocacy funding to maintain program effectiveness and ensure appropriate services for growing numbers of individuals needing comprehensive disability rights promotion and accessibility assistance programs. Individuals with disabilities are receiving minimal advocacy support despite significant donations to Benedictine's organization, explained concerned disability advocate Maximilian to Disability Rights Oversight. She says disability advocacy complexity requires additional rights funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for accessibility programs and disability rights promotion. Investigation revealed Benedictine had been deliberately reducing advocacy services while collecting donations from supporters who trusted her disability expertise, then using disability rights money for personal expenses while providing minimal advocacy and fabricating disability reports to cover financial misappropriation and service reduction. She'd been reducing advocacy staff, eliminating accessibility programs, and using disability funding for personal lifestyle expenses while providing inadequate rights promotion and creating false documentation about disability program effectiveness and accessibility improvement success rates. The scheme particularly harmed individuals with disabilities who needed advocacy services and donors who trusted disability rights giving but faced discrimination through systematic service reduction disguised as disability advocacy complexity, requiring additional rights funding for advocacy enhancement and accessibility program expansion. When disability rights oversight authorities investigated her advocacy practices, they found evidence Benedictine had misappropriated over $400,000 in disability advocacy funding while providing minimal services to individuals with disabilities and fabricating rights effectiveness reports. Our 26th story brings us to Chicago, where Cancer Research Foundation coordinator Mortimer had been funding medical research and patient support for cancer treatment advancement throughout the metropolitan area for 8 years. He was recommended by medical research institutions and praised by patients for his research expertise and ability to advance cancer treatment while providing essential support for patients facing cancer diagnosis and treatment challenges. Mortimer seemed genuinely committed to cancer research and helping patients overcome cancer through comprehensive research funding and support programs designed for treatment advancement and patient care enhancement. Mortimer's foundation funded research that led to breakthrough treatments while providing essential support during my cancer journey, shared grateful cancer survivor Cordelia during a cancer research evaluation. His expertise in medical research funding and patient support provided critical assistance that advanced treatment options while helping patients access necessary care and emotional support for improved outcomes and recovery possibilities. But cancer researchers started experiencing funding delays and patients received limited support despite substantial donor contributions, with Mortimer claiming cancer research complexity and treatment challenges that required additional research funding to maintain program effectiveness and ensure appropriate support for growing numbers of researchers needing comprehensive funding and patients requiring cancer care assistance programs. Cancer researchers are receiving minimal funding and patients get limited support despite substantial donations to Mortimer's foundation, explained concerned cancer advocate Millicent to Medical Research Oversight. He says cancer research complexity requires additional medical funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for research advancement and patient support programs. Investigation revealed Mortimer had been deliberately diverting cancer research funds while collecting donations from supporters who trusted his medical expertise, then using research money for personal enrichment while providing minimal funding and fabricating cancer reports to cover financial exploitation and research reduction. He'd been using cancer research donations for personal investments, luxury purchases, and lifestyle expenses while providing inadequate research funding and creating false documentation about medical program effectiveness and cancer treatment advancement success rates. The scheme particularly harmed cancer researchers who needed funding support and patients who trusted cancer research giving but faced treatment disappointment through systematic fund diversion disguised as cancer research complexity, requiring additional medical funding for research enhancement and patient support program expansion. When medical research oversight authorities investigated his cancer practices, they found evidence Mortimer had diverted over $2.8 million in cancer research funding while providing minimal support to researchers and patients and fabricating medical effectiveness reports. Our 27th story brings us to Houston, where Community Garden Program Director Evangeline had been promoting urban agriculture and nutrition education throughout Southeast Texas for 7 years. She was recommended by environmental organizations and praised by communities for her agriculture expertise and ability to enhance food security while providing essential nutrition education for healthy eating and sustainable agriculture practices. Evangeline seemed genuinely committed to urban agriculture and helping communities achieve food security through comprehensive gardening and nutrition programs designed for food access enhancement and agricultural education improvement. Evangeline's community garden program helped our neighborhood access fresh produce while teaching valuable agriculture and nutrition skills, shared grateful community member Archibald during an urban agriculture evaluation. Her expertise in sustainable farming and nutrition education provided essential knowledge that enhanced our food security while promoting healthy eating habits and environmental awareness for improved community wellness and agricultural sustainability. But communities started experiencing limited garden access and reduced nutrition education despite substantial donor funding, with Evangeline claiming agriculture program complexity and food security challenges that required additional agriculture funding to maintain program effectiveness and ensure appropriate services for growing numbers of communities needing comprehensive urban farming and nutrition education programs. Communities are receiving minimal garden access despite significant donations to Evangeline's program, explained concerned food security advocate Prudence to Urban Agriculture Oversight. She says agriculture program complexity requires additional farming funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for community gardens and nutrition education. Investigation revealed Evangeline had been deliberately reducing agriculture services while collecting donations from supporters who trusted her farming expertise, then using community garden money for personal expenses while providing minimal access and fabricating agriculture reports to cover financial misappropriation and service reduction. She'd been reducing garden maintenance staff, eliminating nutrition programs, and using agriculture funding for personal entertainment and travel expenses while providing inadequate access and creating false documentation about garden program effectiveness and nutrition education success rates. The scheme particularly harmed communities needing food security who trusted urban agriculture services but faced nutrition disappointment through systematic service reduction disguised as agriculture program complexity requiring additional farming, funding for garden enhancement and nutrition education program expansion. When urban agriculture oversight authorities investigated her farming practices, they found evidence Evangeline had misappropriated over $300,000 in community garden funding while providing minimal services to communities and fabricating agriculture effectiveness reports. Our 28th story brings us to San Diego, where Senior Nutrition Program Coordinator Bartholomew had been providing meal delivery and nutrition education for elderly community members throughout Southern California for 6 years. He was recommended by senior service organizations and praised by families for his nutrition expertise and ability to address elderly malnutrition while providing essential meal services for seniors facing nutrition challenges and meal access difficulties. Bartholomew seemed genuinely committed to senior nutrition and helping elderly individuals achieve dietary wellness through comprehensive meal delivery and nutrition programs designed for elderly health enhancement and nutrition security improvement. Bartholomew's nutrition program provided essential meal delivery that helped my elderly mother maintain proper nutrition and health, shared grateful family member Delphine during a senior nutrition evaluation. His expertise in elderly nutrition and meal coordination provided critical services that enhanced my mother's health while ensuring she received proper dietary support for optimal aging and wellness maintenance. But elderly recipients started experiencing reduced meal quality and limited nutrition services despite substantial donor contributions, with Bartholomew claiming senior nutrition complexity and meal challenges that required additional nutrition funding to maintain program effectiveness and ensure appropriate services for growing numbers of elderly individuals needing comprehensive meal delivery and nutrition education programs. Elderly recipients are receiving poor quality meals despite significant donations to Bartholomew's program, explained concerned senior advocate Genevieve to Elderly Nutrition Oversight. He says senior nutrition complexity requires additional meal funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for elderly nutrition and meal delivery programs. Investigation revealed Bartholomew had been deliberately reducing meal quality while collecting donations from supporters who trusted his nutrition expertise, then using senior meal money for personal enrichment while providing substandard nutrition and fabricating meal reports to cover financial exploitation and service reduction. He'd been reducing meal quality, eliminating nutrition programs, and using elderly nutrition funding for personal lifestyle expenses while providing inadequate meals and creating false documentation about nutrition program effectiveness and elderly health improvement success rates. The scheme particularly harmed elderly individuals who needed nutrition services and donors who trusted senior meal giving but faced deception through systematic service reduction disguised as senior nutrition complexity, requiring additional meal funding for nutrition enhancement and elderly meal program expansion. When elderly nutrition oversight authorities investigated his meal practices, they found evidence Bartholomew had misappropriated over $500,000 in senior nutrition funding while providing substandard meals to elderly recipients and fabricating nutrition effectiveness reports. Our 29th story brings us to Atlanta, where Crisis Intervention Hotline Organization Director Clementine had been providing emergency counseling and suicide prevention services throughout the Southeast for 9 years. She was recommended by mental health organizations and praised by communities for her crisis expertise and ability to help individuals facing mental health emergencies while providing essential intervention services for suicide prevention and emotional crisis support. Clementine seemed genuinely committed to crisis intervention and helping individuals overcome mental health emergencies through comprehensive counseling and prevention programs designed for crisis response enhancement and suicide prevention effectiveness. Clementine's hotline provided essential crisis counseling that helped me through a mental health emergency and prevented suicide, shared grateful caller Reginald during a crisis intervention evaluation. Her expertise in emergency counseling and suicide prevention provided critical support that saved my life while helping me access ongoing mental health resources for recovery and emotional stability. But individuals started experiencing limited hotline access and reduced crisis services despite substantial donor funding, with Clementine claiming crisis intervention complexity and mental health challenges that required additional crisis funding to maintain hotline effectiveness and ensure appropriate services for growing numbers of individuals needing comprehensive emergency counseling and suicide prevention programs. Individuals are receiving minimal crisis support despite significant donations to Clementine's hotline, explained concerned mental health advocate Delphine to Crisis Intervention Oversight. She says crisis intervention complexity requires additional emergency funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for suicide prevention and crisis counseling programs. Investigation revealed Clementine had been deliberately reducing crisis services while collecting donations from supporters who trusted her intervention expertise, then using crisis funding for personal expenses while providing minimal counseling and fabricating intervention reports to cover financial misappropriation and service reduction. She'd been reducing crisis counseling staff, eliminating prevention programs, and using intervention funding for personal entertainment and luxury purchases while providing inadequate crisis support and creating false documentation about hotline effectiveness and suicide prevention success rates. The scheme particularly harmed individuals needing crisis intervention who trusted emergency counseling services but faced mental health danger through systematic service reduction disguised as crisis intervention complexity requiring additional emergency funding for crisis support enhancement and suicide prevention program expansion. When crisis intervention oversight authorities investigated her counseling practices, they found evidence Clementine had misappropriated over $800,000 in crisis intervention funding while providing minimal services to individuals facing mental health emergencies and fabricating intervention effectiveness reports. Our 30th story brings us to Phoenix, where Youth Sports Program Foundation founder Genevieve had been providing athletic opportunities and character development for underprivileged children throughout the valley for 5 years. She was recommended by youth organizations and praised by families for her sports expertise and ability to help children develop athletic skills while providing essential character education for positive youth development and community engagement. Genevieve seemed genuinely committed to youth athletics and helping children achieve personal growth through comprehensive sports and character programs designed for youth development enhancement and community participation improvement. Genevieve's sports program helped my son develop athletic skills and character values that transformed his confidence and behavior, shared grateful parent Barnabas during a youth sports evaluation. Her expertise in youth athletics and character development provided essential opportunities that enhanced my son's development while teaching important life skills and positive values for long-term success and community contribution. But youth participants started experiencing limited athletic opportunities and reduced program access despite substantial donor support. With Genevieve claiming youth sports complexity and development challenges that required additional athletics funding to maintain program effectiveness and ensure appropriate services for growing numbers of children needing comprehensive sports opportunities and character development programs. Children are receiving minimal athletic opportunities despite significant donations to Genevieve's foundation, explained concerned youth advocate Octavia to Youth Sports Oversight. She says youth sports complexity requires additional athletics funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for youth development and sports programs. Investigation revealed Genevieve had been deliberately reducing sports services while collecting donations from supporters who trusted her athletics expertise, then using youth sports money for personal enrichment while providing minimal opportunities and fabricating sports reports to cover financial exploitation and service reduction. She'd been reducing sports equipment quality, eliminating development programs, and using athletics funding for personal lifestyle expenses while providing inadequate opportunities and creating false documentation about sports program effectiveness and youth development success rates. The scheme particularly harmed children needing athletic opportunities who trusted youth sports programs but faced development disappointment through systematic service reduction disguised as youth sports complexity, requiring additional athletics funding for sports enhancement and youth development program expansion. When Youth Sports Oversight authorities investigated her athletics practices, they found evidence Genevieve had misappropriated over $400,000 in youth sports funding while providing minimal opportunities to children and fabricating athletics effectiveness reports. Our 31st story brings us to Seattle, where homeless prevention organization coordinator Lysander had been providing rental assistance and housing stability services for families facing eviction throughout the Pacific Northwest for 8 years. He was recommended by housing organizations and praised by communities for his prevention expertise and ability to help families maintain housing while providing essential assistance for eviction prevention and housing stability achievement. Lysander seemed genuinely committed to homeless prevention and helping families achieve housing security through comprehensive rental assistance and stability programs designed for eviction prevention and housing maintenance support. Lysander's organization provided essential rental assistance that prevented our family's eviction and helped us maintain housing stability, shared grateful family member Horatio during a homeless prevention evaluation. His expertise in housing assistance and eviction prevention provided critical support that saved our home while helping us develop financial stability skills for long-term housing security and family welfare. But families started experiencing limited rental assistance and inadequate housing support despite substantial donor contributions. With Lysander claiming homeless prevention complexity and housing challenges that required additional prevention funding to maintain program effectiveness and ensure appropriate services for growing numbers of families needing comprehensive rental assistance and housing stability programs. Families are receiving minimal housing assistance despite significant donations to Lysander's organization, explained concerned housing advocate Evangeline to Homeless Prevention Oversight. He says homeless prevention complexity requires additional housing funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for rental assistance and eviction prevention programs. Investigation revealed Lysander had been deliberately reducing prevention services while collecting donations from supporters who trusted his housing expertise, then using homeless prevention money for personal expenses while providing minimal assistance and fabricating housing reports to cover financial misappropriation and service reduction. He'd been reducing housing assistance amounts, eliminating prevention programs, and using rental assistance funding for personal investments and travel expenses while providing inadequate support and creating false documentation about prevention program effectiveness and housing stability success rates. The scheme particularly harmed families facing eviction who trusted homeless prevention services but faced housing loss through systematic service reduction disguised as homeless prevention complexity, requiring additional housing funding for prevention enhancement and rental assistance program expansion. When homeless prevention oversight authorities investigated his housing practices, they found evidence Lysander had misappropriated over $700,000 in homeless prevention funding while providing minimal assistance to families facing eviction and fabricating housing effectiveness reports. Our 30-second story brings us to Denver, where Environmental Cleanup Foundation Director Prudence had been organizing pollution remediation and conservation projects throughout the Rocky Mountain region for 7 years. She was recommended by environmental agencies and praised by communities for her cleanup expertise and ability to address environmental damage while providing essential conservation services for ecosystem restoration and pollution prevention. Prudence seemed genuinely committed to environmental cleanup and helping communities achieve ecological health through comprehensive remediation and conservation programs designed for environmental restoration and pollution reduction effectiveness. Prudence's foundation organized essential cleanup projects that restored our local ecosystem and addressed pollution problems, shared grateful environmental volunteer Millicent during an environmental cleanup evaluation. Her expertise in pollution remediation and ecosystem restoration provided critical services that enhanced our environmental health while promoting conservation awareness and community participation in environmental protection efforts. But environmental projects started showing minimal progress and questionable cleanup results despite substantial donor funding, with Prudence claiming environmental cleanup complexity and pollution challenges that required additional remediation funding to maintain project effectiveness and ensure appropriate services for growing numbers of contaminated sites needing comprehensive cleanup and restoration programs. Environmental projects show minimal progress despite substantial donations to Prudence's foundation, explained concerned environmental advocate Cordelia to Environmental Cleanup Oversight. She says environmental cleanup complexity requires additional remediation funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for pollution cleanup and ecosystem restoration programs. Investigation revealed Prudence had been deliberately misusing cleanup funds while collecting donations from supporters who trusted her environmental expertise, then diverting remediation money to personal expenses while providing minimal cleanup and fabricating environmental reports to cover financial misappropriation and project failure. She'd been using environmental cleanup donations for personal real estate investments, luxury lifestyle expenses, and travel, while providing inadequate remediation and creating false documentation about cleanup project effectiveness and environmental restoration success rates. The scheme particularly harmed contaminated environments that needed cleanup services and donors who trusted environmental giving but faced ecological disappointment through systematic fund misappropriation disguised as environmental cleanup. Complexity requiring additional remediation funding for cleanup enhancement and conservation program expansion. When environmental cleanup oversight authorities investigated her remediation practices, they found evidence Prudence had misappropriated over $1.1 million in environmental cleanup funding while providing minimal remediation services and fabricating environmental effectiveness reports. Our 33rd story brings us to Miami, where disaster animal rescue organization founder Algernon had been saving pets and wildlife during natural disasters throughout South Florida for 6 years. He was recommended by animal welfare organizations and praised by communities for his rescue expertise and ability to save animals during emergencies while providing essential care for displaced pets and wildlife facing disaster-related dangers. Algernon seemed genuinely committed to disaster animal rescue and helping animals survive catastrophic events through comprehensive emergency rescue and care programs designed for animal welfare enhancement during disaster situations and emergency response coordination. Algernon's rescue organization saved our pets during hurricane evacuation and provided essential care during the emergency, shared grateful pet owner Maximilian during a disaster animal rescue evaluation. His expertise in emergency animal rescue and disaster response provided critical services that saved animal lives while ensuring displaced pets received appropriate care and reunification assistance during catastrophic weather events and evacuation situations. But animals started receiving inadequate rescue care and limited emergency services despite substantial donor contributions. With Algernon claiming disaster animal rescue complexity and emergency challenges that required additional rescue funding to maintain response effectiveness and ensure appropriate services for growing numbers of animals needing comprehensive disaster care and emergency rescue programs. Animals are receiving minimal rescue care despite significant donations to Algernon's organization, explained concerned animal welfare advocate Thaddeus to Disaster Animal Rescue Oversight. He says disaster animal rescue complexity requires additional emergency funding that wasn't included in original donor contributions for animal rescue and disaster response programs. Investigation revealed Algernon had been deliberately reducing rescue services while collecting donations from supporters who trusted his animal expertise, then using disaster animal rescue money for personal enrichment while providing minimal care and fabricating rescue reports to cover financial exploitation and service reduction. He'd been reducing rescue equipment quality, eliminating animal care programs, and using disaster rescue funding for personal investments and luxury expenses while providing inadequate animal care and creating false documentation about rescue program effectiveness and animal welfare success rates during emergency situations. The scheme particularly harmed animals needing disaster rescue who trusted emergency animal services but faced endangerment through systematic service reduction disguised as disaster animal rescue complexity, requiring additional emergency funding for rescue enhancement and animal care program expansion during catastrophic events and emergency response situations. When disaster animal rescue oversight authorities investigated his rescue practices, they found evidence Algernon had misappropriated over $600,000 in disaster animal rescue funding while providing minimal care to animals during emergencies and fabricating rescue effectiveness reports. Thank you for joining me tonight on Drowsy Tales Daily, and may these stories guide you into peaceful sleep with renewed awareness of the importance of charitable accountability and protecting your generous spirit from those who would exploit your compassion during vulnerable giving moments. Sweet dreams, and I'll see you tomorrow night for another collection of fascinating Reddit stories designed to help you drift off to sleep.